there seems to be something there. We're invoking this word, and I think it's appropriate to invoke it, right? We're talking about soul. We're trying to say it takes us to the depths and allows us to see from those depths, the depths of the world. And that is the answer. There's no proposition, but that's the answer to suffering. It doesn't justify it. That it doesn't.
It transcends justification. Justification
Exactly.
doesn't reach up high enough to point to it anyway. It's not the
Yes.
right way of being in relationship with it.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
And this is nice. This also speaks to that notion of the sacred.
yes.
You know, in some sense, grief is an aspect of the sacred in exactly that sense. It is intrinsically transcendent of any effort on our part to justify it. To justify it or to denigrate it is already to not be in right relationship with it.
Yes. And that's what I was trying to get at last time when I said, couching it as that which does not need justification is, when I was talking about Jordan Peterson and Ronnie D'Souza, the sacred is that which cannot be called into question. That's another way of saying the sacred is that which needs no justification. It's a misframing of it. They're trying to get, and there was some good comments about this in the video from people. They're trying to get to the fact that, and I want to use this word and then I want to erase it. They want to get to the idea that the sacred is some sense foundational, right? And so we shouldn't call it into question. But framing it within the way I just said, it's in the justification frame. It's saying, through the justification lens, this is special because it needs no justification. And that's still to bind it. It's just to negate the requirement for justification. Justification is not to transcend it. And so that's why I want to undermine the foundation. It's not foundational. It's not the thing. It's not. And this is where there was one analogy, and other people have used it. So I'm not trying to just pin one person who made a comment. And I apologize if they feel that way. But I don't think the sacred should be understood as axiomatic. I think that's to give it, to try and transpose and translate its function into a purely propositional justificatory framework. And once you've done that, you've lost it. You've lost it. And you've actually lost the ability to grieve and to be with people who are grieving. The worst thing you can do when someone is grieving is to try and justify it or explain it to them.
Oh God, it's brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, commonplace, because we live in a world that has lost access to that mode. So I'm gonna point to that. So I'm gonna use the word mode.
Okay.
Spinoza.
Yes.
And to say, okay, there's a mode, and propositionality is a whole mode.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's not the only mode, right? That's the key point, right? I've now defined the term so I can talk about there being different modes. And as you're saying, and I think this is dead on, right? The right answer to the question that was put to Jordan Peterson is not that the sacred is a special case in the mode of propositionality, right? But the propositionality as a mode is the wrong way of being in relationship with the sacred.
Yes.
If you're doing that, if you're just playing that game at all, you're already in the wrong place.
Right.
Okay, well, what are the other modes? All right, well, there's another one, at least one more. I would say there's three, but we can, it's a little bit longer conversation. And this is the mode of, there's the mode of hold on, let me actually back up a little bit and just define some more terms. So one is, I'm going to just steal the Greek meta, and then the Greek trans, and I'm going to distinguish them. Right. Propose that there is a useful distinction.
Okay.
And so meta, I would propose, is very much of the case of what we were just talking about in terms of a special case where we move in the propositional mode.
Okay.
So I have some schema of justification, and then what I do is I basically think of that as a container now. It's a box.
Yeah.
And what I do is I create a bigger box that's outside that box.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, it's a bigger box. Everything inside, like Bertrand Russell.
Yeah.
Everything, I've just defined a set, and now I've defined a new set that is precisely everything in that set plus something not in that set.
Right.
And of course, the point of meta, sorry for those who were following that was a very abstract formulation, but precise. The problem with the meta is that there is a way of articulating every move in the meta by definition as being part of the meta, right? It's
Yeah.
it's that set of moves, the whole that I can close on that logical construct. And by the way, for those who are interested, Gödel gives us the answer to that question all the way to the end. There is a intrinsic non-closure to that mode.
Yeah.
So then we got this other mode. And now I'm going to shift modally and move us into first person. So now let's meditate for a little bit.
Yeah.
And so there's the classic awareness of, or sort of meditation 101, where you are noticing the arising of things like narrative, images too, but for most Americans, Westerners, it's mostly talk.
Yeah, mostly words. Yeah.
Mostly words. And there's a point at which there becomes an ability to sort of distance from that and then notice that there's an awareness that is the observer observing. Yeah. And okay, well, and then there's a question of, okay, well, what the heck is that? There's something that's not the other thing. Like there's something going on here that's not exactly the same. And the proposition is that there is a quality. Now this is the modal shift in the trans, which is precisely not the bigger box. Right?
Yes.
It is the. I mean, we've talked about this in the context of sacred before. The infinite. Right? And the infinite is not a bigger finite. Those aren't the same things. Like the infinite is modally distinct from the finite.
Yes.
No amount of numbers are going to get you to the infinite.
Yes.
And yet it's also part of the real.
Yes.
Right? The real is in many ways sort of the relationship between the finite and the infinite.
Yes.
And not contained in either one either. Right. That would be the third mode. And so there's something about that. Right. There's something about recognizing that these are all aspects of the real, and there's a way of developing competence. Now we can make it very simple, like competence, skillfulness, artfulness of relationality in that mode. Right? There is a proper mode. There's a proper way of being in relationship with the transcendent, with the trans piece of that move.
Yes.
And it has nothing to do with systems of justification, right? They are just not the same kind of thing. But it's not a null set, right? There's a thing there. And as we were just talking about this, there are people, maturity, like this notion of maturity, the ability to know, like the wisdom. Oh, okay, it's a whole. It's a whole, man. It's there.
Yeah.
He is to grow. Oh, okay, that's interesting. That's a totally different thing. That's oblique to the notion of like increasing sophistication within a closed domain. It's where does growth come from? Growth comes from the outside. Growth comes from the transcendent per se, that which is intrinsically in and of itself, the outside, right? The creative principle. We talk about the notion of creation and creative, growth comes from that, right? It comes from the creative principle per se, coming into, like transferring or being metabolized into something, and openness to that and artfulness in that. And then of course, what happens, as you say, is that the capacity to be in relationship with life grows with it.